Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 8. A hand covered my mouth. Pain was the first thing I felt. It fell over me in waves. My mind burned. Red-streaked fingertips moved sluggishly beneath my gaze. With odd uncertainty, I decided they were my own hands. As if made from molasses, I saw myself slowly coming out of the haze of unconsciousness. My breath caught. Strong hands moved me up into a sitting position. My point of view shifted, and I felt fingers digging into my arms, shaking me awake. I almost fell forward in a drunken-like stupor. A jar filled with a clear liquid lay several feet from me. I knew I must drink it or I would die. The sense of impending doom was indescribable. Finally coming out of my delirium, I groped forward on hands and knees, almost knocking over the precious jar. Grasping it with hands far too shaky, I greedily gulped the liquid down. Turning my head ever so slowly, I saw Stannon, disgust plain on his face. "You were barely worth the trouble. When I return, be ready for work." That was all. Numbly, I heard him rise and close the door behind him. Only one window peeked high on the wall of the dingy room. A small sliver of light crept forward, the angle making it impossible to tell what time of day it could be. I started shaking with chill. Dimly, I remembered overhearing the town doctor speaking of this type of chill in the heat of the desert. They called it the death chills. Few who got like this ever fully recovered. It came from exceedingly high stress or dehydration. Some people simply broke, living on but being unable to feed or clothe themselves without assistance. They had a stillness to their eyes and features. I once saw the look in a young girl. She had drooled uncontrollably about and had been led away by an adult. I never forgot her empty stare. The walls of the room seemed to be in disrepair. The wood paneling was rotted out and smeared with dirt and grime. I finished the last of the water jug and hugged it closely to myself, as though it were everything that mattered in the world to me. My head hurt, and I felt weaker than I had ever felt before. With sure realization, I knew that Stannon would return shortly, and I would need to prove myself. My very life, no doubt, depended on it. Shaking slightly from racking chills, I groped towards the bed on my stomach, searching for a blanket, or something to wrap myself in. My mind fluttered hazily to the journey across the sand. Sky Peak must be no more than 10 or 15 miles to the north. Dimly, I had known that other towns existed within the great expanse of desert, but I had never been farther than Sky Peak. It had been named for a large outcropping of rock formations that jutted upwards into the sky, rising more than 200 feet. There was no shelter from the sun during the climb, but it was said to be even more treacherous a climb at night. The footing was precarious at best, and the cliff was home to several breeds of poisonous lizards. My mind remembered Stannon's offer. Then came the howling desert winds, then nothing. I heard a creak in the floorboards and was abruptly brought back to the present. I hadn't eaten in hours. My stomach growled painfully in reminder. Forcing myself to stand, I staggered over to the window. The bright light hurt my eyes. Eyes watering slightly, I gazed down to the street. The bright sand below was a thoroughfare of sorts. People slowly crossed under my line of vision, reddish-brown horses following after them. A team of oxen lumbered slowly forward, bringing a cart laden with supplies and sacks into view. An old man sat the saddle with a weary air, the sun beating down on his bald pate. He fished for a low-brimmed hat near the front of the cart before setting it on his head. I could hear murmurs of a market past the edges of my vision through the window. Criers could be heard hawking their wares. A young nobleman passed beneath. His short-cropped beard was visible, and was in the popular style where it was waxed to a point. He wore a fine suit whose appearance had been somewhat lessened by the travel dust that coated it in a fine film. He wore a dome-shaped white hat that was rimmed in silver and a deep jade. He had fine spectacles that were attached to a chain, which was fastened to the front of his coat pocket. His hands were covered with light black gloves, embossed with jade patterns and light scrollwork. A jarring sounded from the level below my room within the building. Shaking slightly, I mopped my brow of sweat with the back of my hand. Stannon had returned. I was sure of it. In my weakened state, I wasn't sure I could comply with the work he had promised earlier. Mind searching, I swung myself around on the bed into a sitting position facing the door. The door quickly and silently opened. Stannon was wrapped in a heavy riding cloak, even in this heat. He stepped soundlessly into the room and leveled his gaze in my direction. "We aren't staying long, but I can't risk being seen again and perhaps being recognized. There was little to worry about in your fly-speck town, but now that we are in a larger, more well-known town, there is a chance, a small one, that a watcher will recognize me. I have been careful up until now, and you will be useful to scout ahead of me. Get up. Your work starts now." It was not a suggestion, I realized. I struggled to comply, lest I anger the man. This was no time to be slow. I needed to convince Stannon that I could provide some use to him. My mind drifted back to the image of seeing myself lying in the ditch. I felt bile rise in my throat. My body desperately craved food to steady my aching stomach. "Where?" I croaked. Stannon took a moment to smile. It was not a pleasant expression. "You will go to the market and gather provisions for us to continue on. You will be watched." He let the unspoken threat linger a moment before continuing. "Take the following list. Gather each of the items for me. If any should be missing or light, I will know of it." "What if they don't have the supplies you have listed here?" "Then you will need to find a suitable replacement for them," he rejoined. I paused for a moment, waiting for further instructions, but after a minute passed, then too, I figured I was dismissed. Carefully tucking the list into a pocket, I moved unsteadily to the door. I tried hard not to show any weakness. In the back of my mind, I still had more questions, but was afraid to ask, lest I anger the man further. The chills became especially bad for a moment as I crossed the grimy hallway before reaching the landing. I stifled vomiting into a corner only barely. I reached the bottom of the stairs, abruptly realizing the building must have been condemned, or simply uninhabited, except by squatters. The building must have been abandoned years ago. Distantly, I wondered where the clear liquid I drank earlier came from. I decided not to think any further on the matter. I saw a rat scurry across the darkened room. Rotting beams filled what must have once been a tavern common room. Seeing a building in such a state of disrepair would have astonished Millie's parents. They would never have allowed such a thing to come pass in their town. But I was not there. Realizing every moment mattered and proving myself with this task, I set towards the door. The splintered door tilted crazily off its hinges. Peering out carefully from the building, the entryway opened into a small alley about 30 yards from the main thoroughfare. Mounds of refuse and unwanted garbage filled much of the alley. The stench was unimaginable. My eyes watered as I crossed over, carefully avoiding stepping into any of the piles of refuse on my way towards the street. The mouth of the alley was a sliver thin and was recessed in shadow. The street lay right before me, almost empty save a few passerby. The sun still rose high in the sky. Hi everyone. If you've been enjoying my content and you'd like to support my channel, you can do so at patreon.com/authorsprocess. And it would mean a great deal to me to be able to keep bringing you great content and sharing it with you on multiple platforms. Here is the page that you will see if you choose to support me. And on this page, you will be able to choose what membership level you could support at. Again, only if you choose to. But we have the initial level dedicated to the arts, and then lover of the arts, patron of the arts, and grand patron of the arts. So what you will receive is early access to my content, and then at the higher levels, your name will be listed at the end of each of my videos in a special thanks section. So again, please consider it. It would mean a great deal to me. And thank you so much again. Even if you're unable to support monetarily, just viewing my content is great support as well. So thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate you.